Hey, you are listening to Oh Crap Parenting with me, your host, Jamie Glowacki. This is a podcast for conscious parents who drop the F-bomb a lot. Hey, friends. Welcome. So today I want to follow up on the heels of 2 podcasts ago when I talked about the hard things, how to talk about sex and not to talk about sex too late. A lot of great feedback from that episode. And a big question that came up for quite a few people was, when do you start talking about drugs and alcohol? So I want to dive into that. But first, I want to give a little winter warning. So I'm in Rhode Island. I'm in the Northeast, and we're getting a fair amount of snow this February. So it's mid-February. So I am imagining we still have some cold weather left. If you are in a place with cold, I want to tell you what happened to me so that you can be warned. I love being outside. I'm outside probably for 3 hours a day, and I'm walking Maverick. He is high needs, shall we say. And I just love being outside in the cold. But a couple of weeks ago, I was waking up, and of course I wake up super early. So like it's before dawn, and the light isn't all that great in my little house. And, I was like so ugly. Like, when you look in the mirror and you're like, what happened? What happened overnight? And I looked old, and I'm not afraid of aging. Like, I love all my wrinkles. I will not get work done on my face. I don't use filters at all. I have gray coming in patches. Like, I feel like these are badges we earn. I think we should age without procedures. It's my personal view. And so I was just looking in the mirror, and I was like, looking haggard. It was almost like my face was melting. I looked wrinkly. I looked gray, and I was so distressed, and I couldn't really figure it out. So I'm like, okay, this really only happens in the morning, right? So maybe it's how I'm sleeping. And I am a stomach sleeper and side sleeper. And, that mashes your face up against the pillow. And I have French linen sheets. So little tangent here. I have the best bed, the best sheets, and the best pillows. Somebody told me this once: we spend a third of our lives in bed. So we tend to think of that as like no time, but we spend a third of our lives in bed. So I take my sleep hygiene very seriously, and I have it's one place that I don't skimp on money. I invest in a really great high quality mattress. I replace it when necessary. And French linen sheets, right? Which was an investment, but I don't know if you know linen, it's got sort of a weave to it. So it's coarse. And the beauty of French linen is the more you wash it, the tighter the weave gets. So it feels very, luxurious. However, there is a weave to it. So I was like, man, maybe I'm just mashing my face up against this weave. So I was like chatting to a friend, and then I think it's weird because you guys know my diet. I eat fatty meat. I get plenty of collagen. I take very good care of my body, my health. And so I'm like, what is it? My friend said to me, she said, are you moisturizing? And because I eat so high animal protein and fats, I almost never need lotion. Like, my skin is not visibly dry. And I was like, yeah, I moisturize like occasionally. I have the most pitiful skincare routine. I wash with goat milk soap, and I put beef tallow on my face. That's like what I do. And then she said, yeah, but outside, do you moisturize before you go outside? And I was like, what? Like, I've never, ever done that. And she said, yeah, well, you snowboard, you're out with Mav, you're outside all the time. And like where you live is kind of windy. So you need something to protect your face before going outside. So I started using shea butter, just plain shea butter, as like a coating before I go outside. And it was miraculous. It was like my face needed hydrating. And so, I mean, you can see it, like I have good, my skin looks good, and I don't look gray and wrinkled. But it was so wild because I was like, there's no way I aged from like 56 to 80 overnight. And so anyway, this is your winter warning. If you do spend time outside and it's cold, don't forget to put something on your face before going out. Again, it can be anything. And some companies sell like hiking face sticks, for people who hike mountains in the winter and things like that. But I found just regular shea butter to be super helpful. So let that be your winter warning. All right. So let's talk about, when should you start talking about drugs and alcohol? Okay, let me preface this with a couple of things. I think a lot of this conversation has to do with your own personal views and consumption and your family's consumption of drugs and alcohol. And I think when we talk about drugs, it's a little bit tricky because there's prescription drugs, there's recreational drugs that are legal, and then there are things that people consider fairly benign in most circumstances, myself included. These include like psychedelic mushrooms, pot, but then we get into prescription drugs, which get dangerous because we're looking at opioids. We're looking at oxy and Klonopin and benzodiazepines and things like that that could be in your medicine cabinet or that you yourself utilize, which is fine. I'm casting no judgment on how people use this. Same with alcohol. Alcohol is illegal. The Surgeon General just announced that no amount of alcohol is safe. There is... I follow a lot of like sober mom accounts, and it's wild how people defend alcohol. So this is coming from my point of view, and I will tell you what I did with Pascal, because I think this is a deeply personal thing. If you are from Europe and you are accustomed to having a tiny glass of wine with dinner, and you always did since you were a kid, and that's your view, that's great. We know that in Europe, they don't have the rates of alcoholism we have. We could explode this conversation into hours long and talk about systemic things, reasons why that is possibly true in community and how isolated we are in the United States, generally speaking. We can also say that how things are produced in the U.S., there's often a lot of additives, preservatives, things like that to the wine and alcohol. But for the most part, when we're going to have this conversation with our kids, I think a lot of it depends on your personal views. And I know some people, gardening is what the culture of smoking weed is called. And I know there's a whole community of a large amount of people who use weed as an anti-anxiety or for, easing sicknesses, nausea, all kinds of things. So if you are a medical user and it's in your house and maybe your kids know about that, it's going to be a different conversation for you. I don't think if it's not a part of your culture, so if it's not a thing that's kind of in your face, this isn't something you have to start early as a conversation. I do think that there are two things you need to know, well, maybe three things you need to know about drugs and alcohol. Number one, I think the lamest thing you can do as a parent is simply tell your children, don't drink, don't do drugs, and then you punish them if they get caught with it. I think that is tremendously lame. We have so much information about all these substances that we can share with our kids, what it does to your brain, what it does to your body, why you shouldn't. We also, I think, need to look at why kids would want to alter their consciousness, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. I think you need to be aware. So many parents move to certain areas because of a school district, because of a better school district. The more affluent your school district, the more likely you are to see drug and alcohol use. I have noticed this professionally, personally, throughout all of my life. There are more prescriptions in cabinets, and kids will take handfuls of pills from their parents' prescriptions and have parties and throw those pills into a bowl. And then kids just take, 4 of whatever, not even knowing what they're taking. So this really does happen. I think that you just need to be aware of that. It also happens in much poorer areas. So if you're sort of just middle class in a regular run-of-the-mill school district, you're probably in better shape. So it's just something to be aware of, because I think parents tend to think, oh, we're in the best school district. And I'm like, whoa, do you know the drugs that are coming out of that school? It's pretty wild. Also, kids usually have more access to disposable income. So that is the other thing. And then the third thing is something I said in the Sex and Chores episode, which is please, 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 please do not think not my kid. I know my kid. My kid's honest. It's not fucking true. And I hate to be the one to break it to you. And I have a freaking amazing relationship with Pascal. And he still hides things from me. And if you think back to when you were a teenager and how sneaky you were, it's just part of growing up, and kids in their quest for autonomy are going to save things from you, and you will not know about it. So don't be that parent and keep blinders on. Your child, 99% chance of trying drugs and alcohol in high school. if not middle school. So please don't be that parent with blinders on and think, not my kid. And I have a friend who asked me to actually reiterate it on this podcast because she's having some struggles with her co-parenting with her ex. And she just kind of opened a door by accident and found out all these things that her kids were not willing, didn't want to share, didn't want to say. And it opened some floodgates for the whole family. And so, and she was like, say that on your podcast, because we all think we know our kids. And yes, when they're 6, we usually can tell when they're lying, but man, they master this skill. So those are the 3 big things I think you need to remember. Now, if drinking is, I'm going to address drinking far more than drugs, because I feel like drinking is legal. It's often in people's houses. It's the access to it, or finding somebody older than you who will buy for you, if not stealing from your parents' liquor cabinets, is just too rampant. Maybe you don't have alcohol in your house, but so many houses do, where the kids can siphon off a little bit of the wine, siphon off a little bit of the vodka, put water in it, that kind of thing. So I also think that alcohol is way more prevalent. Alcohol is so glorified in our society. And once you pull away from alcohol, or maybe you've never been into it, you start to notice it's in every freaking movie. It's in every television show. My like numb out show when I just don't feel like thinking is Big Bang Theory. It used to be Friends, but I got sick of that. Now it's Big Bang Theory. It's just, like if I'm stretching at night, and there is wine or beer in every episode. And it's like not a big feature, but it's there. And it's wild. We use alcohol to celebrate. We use alcohol when we're sad. We use alcohol when we're anxious, when we have a good time, when we have a bad time. It's just so prevalent. So if it is prevalent in your life, that is a way that's damaging, you may have to introduce this conversation to your child earlier, but it won't be a conversation about them and them potentially using drugs or alcohol. It will be a conversation about what alcohol does and why you may choose to be away from it. When I talk, last episode, I talked about the village, and that I do understand that there are toxic behaviors in which people have to disown family members or go no contact. And a lot of times I hear about alcohol being a part of that, the grandparents might the grandparents might want to take the kids for the weekend, but the grandparents drink and they get a little sloppy, or they get a little belligerent, or they get over the top fun, right? So that may be a reason. This factored prominently into Pascal's childhood. So a lot of my family drinks alcoholically, very heavily. And we also lived by Providence College, right next to the college when Pascal was little. And we saw aberrant behavior around alcohol. And one of the things that you saw it was a pretty high pressure college, was the binge mentality. Like, you didn't see anybody during the week at all. And then the weekends, the kids went absolutely berserk. I'm talking about girls giving blowjobs to people in my front yard. I'm talking about girls walking around in underpants with like grain alcohol in bags. It was insane. And they would wake Pascal up there. Oh, it was awful. And so I would tell Pascal, I was like, that's alcohol. Like, we're not even approaching those people because they're drunk. We'll call the police. We do this. And in my own family, we started, he really started to notice. He was like, oh boy, so-and-so's repeating themselves, or so-and-so's starting to get crying, or weepy. And I would be like, okay, it's time to leave. So we would leave the party, the family gathering, the holiday, when the alcohol and parties do that, right? There's like a tipping point where it's a little too much. So that factored heavily into Pascal's childhood. But I always said, that means that people are drinking. It never ends well after this. So we're going to go. So we would leave because of the drinking. And I didn't make a big deal about it. And I wasn't like super judgy. I was just like, that's not the behavior we like. I will say, more and more, I've heard a lot of interviews on like Sober Mom podcasts. Like, if you feel like you need to have a glass of wine or a drink every evening to take the edge off, there are other options. One thing I see in comments, and I see it from kids, kids who are grown now, your kids absolutely know absolutely know you change personalities. I don't know if you know this, but alcohol is psychedelic. It has a psychedelic effect on the brain. So it changes your behavior. And maybe you feel like you have the edge taken off so you can be the fun mom or you can be a little more present now. But the reality is it takes you out, and your kids absolutely notice that. And a lot of parents don't think of that. They think, oh, I'm just having one or two, but your kids are watching and they will notice. I think I mentioned this a long time ago. I have a friend who suffers from anxiety and drinks quite a lot to kind of try to manage that, even though alcohol makes anxiety worse. And then her daughter was 11 and struggling with some test anxiety. And she was like, well, do you think some wine would help me like it helps you? And that it's like, is that what we want to teach our kids? Is that how we deal with, anxiousness, or when we need to take the edge off? Like, what else can we do? And I know it's super stressful. Like, life is super stressful right now. But anyway, I will tell you, this isn't a sponsored product, but I'm going to try to get these guys to sponsor me because I love the product so much. It's called Kava Haven. And it is, Kava is a root that is known for like promoting relaxation. And so it's non-alcoholic. You mix it with whatever you want, like soda water. It's kind of got like almost like a bitter lemon flavor. And it tastes like, I like the taste of it, but the feeling is like the first 2 sips of wine. So it just kind of like mellows you out a little. So anyway, Kava is one of those products that you can look into. They have tinctures and different things. So like I said, so that's how I approached it with Pascal. So we had that conversation young because about just what alcohol does to the brain, what it does to personalities, how the party kind of goes downhill after a certain time. Now, again, if that's not part of your reality and nobody in your family drinks, you have a good time, I don't think this is a conversation you need to have early on. I think it's a conversation for middle school. And when you have a conversation about peer pressure, about fitting in, about parties that you may not be at, hopefully in middle school, parties are still being attended to. Again, the more affluent the area you live in, you have to be careful. Parents go on vacation. I just have noticed across the board in more affluent communities, not carelessness, but like more parents are willing to like go on vacation and leave their teenagers in charge, which I think the teenager should be in charge. But there's a cavalier attitude, I think, about drinking that I have seen. So it's just something to be aware of. If there's parties happening, who's going to be there? I think the conversation is and should be always around, do you feel comfortable? Because kids are going to try things, but let's face it, alcohol and weed anyway are not comfortable things. Alcohol tastes gross for most kids, and weed is like smoking. Like, I can't believe I started smoking when I was 13, but I remember turning green. I remember throwing up, and I was like, no, press on. You too can get addicted to cigarettes. Like it's such a weird thing, right? Same thing with weed. It like makes you choke, right? You're smoking it. So I think that there is, there's the bigger conversation is like peer pressure and why you would need it to fit in. And so the one time Pascal and his friends got busted for drinking, they went to some sort of party. There was some sort of, God knows what was in it, probably grain alcohol, like a Kool-Aid colored punch, and they overdrank, and they all got sick. They all various stages of passed out, but they were at Pascal's friend's house. So I got a call in the morning, and I had to go over, and we had an adult round table about it. And the other parents were like, they're punished, they're grounded. And I was like, that's not how I parent. I was like, I sat with these guys and I was like, why? Why did you feel like you had to like mess up your brain? Why did you feel like, were you not comfortable there? So I think there are bigger conversations than just punishing a kid, because punishing teenagers only leads to more vigilant not getting caught. It doesn't usually curb the behavior, but I think these bigger conversations earn your trust and your respect, both of you, when you can have these deeper conversations about what was happening. Most of the boys that night reported that it wasn't so much that they felt uncomfortable. It's that they all were blown away at how fast alcohol stacked up in their system. So it's not Coca-Cola. You can't just have endless amounts, right? Like, and still feel okay, that it stacks up. And so then we talked about, I had a long conversation with all of them about the half-life of alcohol, and alcohol tricks your brain. You think you're fine. No person gets on the road with too many drinks in their system thinking, I'm going to go kill other people and kill myself. Nobody thinks that. They all think that they're in their right mind and that everything's going to be fine. And so alcohol is sneaky like that, and it tricks you. And part of that is its half-life. So I think, again, there are so many ways to approach this conversation besides don't do it or you're in trouble, where like have these actual conversations. What does alcohol do? Look it up. Look what it does to a young brain. Look what it does to judgment. How people, you can look up police reports, like how many people get killed a year because of alcohol. Like, I can't believe alcohol is still legal. It's without hardly even a warning on the bottle. But these are huge things and huge conversations, and also make it super available for your child to bail very quickly. And so that's where we get into the X text. I've talked about that before. So the X text was about 10 years ago, I think I heard of it. I did not come up with this idea. But it is your child simply texts you an X, and that means come and get me right now, no questions asked. And so that is a great one. I've heard people use emojis or whatever. And so what happens is if they're in a peer pressure situation and somebody might swipe their phone and they might get shit for it, it gives them a real out. A code to come and get them. And the key thing is no questions asked. So you don't harangle them when they get in the car. You pick them up and say, thank you for calling me. I'm glad I could help you stay safe. The other thing is, if your child calls you in an altered state looking for a ride, you also have to back off. And that's not the time for a lecture. That's not the time for a lesson or a punishment. Like, thank you for calling me. That was the right decision. The decision to get altered was not the right decision, but we'll have another conversation about that. But this was absolutely the right decision. In order, we don't want our kids drinking or doing drugs at too young an age. It's not good for their brain. Absolutely. However, getting into a vehicle is the next worst thing, if not the worst thing. So make it easy for you to be the person, and you don't want this to happen repeatedly, of course, but make you the safe person so that if somebody is drunk, if your child is stranded, if they're drunk, if, whatever the situation may be, they got themselves into hot water, you be the safe person to get them out of that hot water. Now with drugs, again, I think a lot depends on your personal views, what you personally think of drugs. I will say that it's a really tricky time to be a parent. Now, I have opened this to Pascal. He has taken me up on it for a couple of things. That if you would like to try something, ask me. I will procure it and you will try it under my auspices. And I know that sounds probably not what some people will do. And this is very deeply personal, and it will be deeply personal for you. But my niece died of an accidental fentanyl overdose. She got addicted to opioids for pain relief after a surgery and couldn't afford prescriptions, couldn't get a prescription, started buying it off the internet and got some oxy that was laced with fentanyl. So she died. And so I have a different view. I am petrified of fentanyl. It is out there. It takes less than a pinhead of fentanyl to kill somebody. It is being laced in everything, including weed, including vapes. It's awful. It's killing people rapidly. So it's very scary thing. And so knowing that these things are out there, kids can buy drugs on Snapchat. They can buy them off of Instagram. There is a huge black market out there that is very available to teenagers. And so I want to make sure that, even with prescription drugs, once it leaves that prescription bottle, you have no idea how many milligrams it is. You don't know what it is. These can be tragic, tragic endings. So I opened that up mostly. I didn't ever think he would take it up on me because I know it's a weird thing as a parent, but death, I was not willing to entertain him potentially dying. So he did take me up on a couple of things, and I think it also opened a bridge of trust where he knew there didn't have to be sneaking around. And I know his friend was taking something and he brought one home to see if we could figure out what it was. So I think the biggest thing is to stay honest and open with your child as much as you can. You know, we talk a lot about this on this podcast. Like if you do your foundational work, then you can have these harder conversations when they're teenagers. And I just think if we continually just go with the don't do that or you're in trouble, we close down communication, we invite sneakiness. And I feel like we can't afford the sneakiness, not with drunk driving and not with fentanyl out in the market and not with the addiction rates of oxy and opioids and benzodiazepines. So be aware, keep your prescriptions under lock and key. And this conversation pretty much has to happen, I would say middle school. And that's about right, because that's when fitting in really starts to take hold. Peer orientation, peer pressure, all these things, peer pressure to bully, peer pressure to be the mean kid, peer pressure or to exclude. And I think that's when you can open this conversation of drugs and alcohol. And again, it's really going to be based on your lifestyle. If alcohol is nowhere near your lifestyle, you still have to have the conversation, but it won't enter the chat until, till middle school. It won't have to be something. And if you have younger kids and alcohol is disrupting a relationship in your life, you can absolutely drugs or alcohol, you can absolutely say, no, we don't see Uncle Tony anymore. He does drugs, which they make his mind different than he would be regularly. And it makes him, yell at you and yell at everybody. And we don't accept that behavior. So it doesn't have to be heavy. It doesn't have to be super judgy. It just has to be, no, we don't entertain that. Right. And that's just a boundary you probably have decided to take yourself anyway, because Uncle Tony has proven himself. I have an Uncle Tony. His name is not Tony, but I think we all have somebody in our family like that. So yeah. And as always, just connection first, connection and curiosity. And I think that's going to be your compass in any of these conversations. So I hope that was helpful. And, if you have any questions, I'd love to hear them. I love talking about this stuff. The podcast I did last week on The Village, really, I got a lot of good feedback on that. So we got to keep going and supporting each other, right? And telling these stories, I love maybe get together with your mom group and be like, hey, maybe bring up this podcast. Like, when are you going to talk about drugs and alcohol? When are you going to talk about these things? And I think there's just, we might as well tack on porn, right? I probably should say a little bit about porn. I have said this before, your child is not ready for a smartphone unless you're ready to have the conversation about porn and what it is, because once your child has a smartphone and has access to the internet, they will be introduced to porn, if not sooner. There's always some kid who's found it before all the other kids. And so that is another thing that needs to have a conversation about and what that looks like, because it can be very jarring. On that note, I will say, always be on the lookout for changed behavior. Yeah. If your bright, outgoing, sunshiny kid suddenly is in their room all the time, suddenly, seeming depressed or not eating or any sort of big personality changes. Yes, they hit big changes in, 12, 13, 14. Yes, they will get moody. Yes, they will have no executive functioning. Yes, they will get sarcastic. There's all these things, but big personality changes, be on the lookout for, because that could be anything, exposure to porn. It could be peer pressure. It could be drugs and alcohol. So we always want to keep our eyes out for that. And so you see that, you jump in. And once your child, I think getting busted at a party for drinking too much is a conversation. But if you see things going down rapidly, I am absolutely pro intervention. Take the phone, search the room. I don't think at a certain level where you're fearing for your child's safety, I don't think that's when you have the conversations. I think there is a time where we lower the boom. I have not seen it in my community. I have seen it professionally. I have seen where kids take a nosedive, but that's not where we have conversations. So if you feel like something really drastic is happening with your child, yes, you go in and you search all the browser histories and all of that. Kids are fucking sneaky. There are so many apps. There's an app that looks like a calculator. There's an app that looks like a clock, and you can hide all the apps in there. I knew a kid years ago in 4-H. His parents were super strict, took his phone at night and searched the phone, and he deleted apps at the end of the night. He just deleted them and then reinstalled them in the morning. So there are all kinds of ways to be a sneaky teenager. And I think one of the things Jonathan Haidt says this in his book, The Anxious Generation, we are protecting our kids far too much in real life and not enough online. So don't make your child go online for their interactions. Yeah. Provide them with kids want to be in person more than anything. Most kids, I would venture to say all kids would rather have in-person friends and in-person time than be online. They go online because they don't have the mall anymore. They don't go just roaming the streets as a neighborhood bunch. And so make sure, like, if you're not the house, get those things set up so your kid has some lively, fun times with their friends. Have them over. I just went bowling the other night with a friend, and I was like, Pascal, like, next time your friends are over, let's go bowling. And he was like, oh my God, that'd be so fun. Like, even when they're 18 and 19, like, if we lead them in games, in activities, you don't have to be present. You don't have to be the hovering parent. But if we provide these houses and these opportunities for them to have in-person gatherings, to eat shit food, to gossip, to wrestle, to have that in-person interaction, a lot of this online stuff goes away. And teen suicide is up. Teen depression is up. It's like a nightmare right now to be a teenager. And so it's really something we have to take seriously. And so these all factor in. Social media, porn, factor in with drugs and alcohol and fitting in and changed behavior. So, all right, did I scare you all sufficiently? I don't mean to scare you. These just are things that we have to be aware of. Again, like, Pascal has been lovely, but he's always been a in-person kid. We've really, even during the pandemic, we made sure there was so much in person, like with the families we potted up with. I have always, because we live so far away and we homeschooled, like, his social life has always been a priority to me, and in person, those kinds of things. So yeah, I don't want to scare you guys at all. It's just things to be on the lookout. And I think sometimes what we do is we think we say the words, right? Like, well, I told them not to drink. I told them not to drive. I told them people get killed in drunk driving. I don't know why they, drank and drive that night. But we have to know that kids don't have judgment. They don't have judgment. They'll do impulsive things, even as teenagers. They'll do the wrong thing, again, for peer pressure, fitting in, just to try it, just to see, and they won't know how fast, like, the alcoholic, it stacks up, or that all of a sudden they're really out of their minds or something. So anyway, be their safe harbor, and we'll all navigate this together. All right, you guys, as always, I appreciate you. I appreciate you listening. Rock on and have a beautiful day.
Okay, bye everyone. Just a reminder, if you need additional resources, I have Oh Crap Potty Training. I have Oh Crap, I Have a Toddler. Those books are available everywhere you want to find a book. You can also go to my website, jamieglowacki.com, where you can book private sessions with me, buy any of my courses. Those are really geared towards potty training help. And also, I'm on Instagram. I'm not on Facebook anymore, and I'm not on Twitter. I'm on Instagram, jamie.glowacki, and I do a lot of lives and usually posting a lot of good information. So those are extra resources for you. And as always, rock on. Have an awesome day.